I see my good friend Brad Phillips right next to me on my screen. So Brad, you go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. My name is Brad Phillips. I'm the Executive Director for the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, and happy to be here, and thanks so much. And I will call on Candace.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Candace Carrico. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at the University System of Maryland office. I think Allison Wren, our Senior Vice Chancellor, should be joining us, so I'm going to call on her.
I'm here. Hi, sorry. I've been in meetings already all morning. Morning, everybody. I'm assuming we're doing introductions. I'm Dr. Allison Wren, Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and Student Success here at the University System of Maryland, joined in January. Am I passing it on to someone? Let's see.
Yes, Allison.
Matt, have you been introduced yet?
I have not, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Matt Power. I'm the president of the Maryland Independent College and University Association. It's good to see everybody. Glad to be part of this meeting. I will call on Jimmy Clark.
Oh, all right. Thank you, Matt. My name is Jimmy Clark. I am a senior advisor for HCM strategists. I'm located in Lafayette, Louisiana, and my colleagues and I will be talking with you later today about some planning issues. So I'll pass it actually to one of my colleagues, Martha Snyder. Is Martha on?
Yes.
I am, yes. Good morning, everyone. Martha Snyder, Manager Director with HCM Strategists. As Jimmy noted, we'll be working and presenting to you later today around goals and strategic planning. I am located in Buffalo, New York. And just to take care of the HCM team, I'll turn it over to Will Carroll.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Will Carroll, Director with HCM Strategists, and located closest of all the HCM folks. I'm in Washington, D.C. So looking forward to speaking with you all a little bit later. And all of the names are now hidden in terms of, but I've got my, let's see. Let's go with Derek Coley.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Derek Coley. I serve as the Executive Director for External Relations at the Maryland Higher Education Commission. I'm just Acting Secretary Rye. Please meet everybody this morning. Thank you, Will.
And Derek, you will pass on to somebody?
Oh, Jimmy. Good morning.
Well, good morning, but I have actually just, unless there's another Jimmy, I've introduced myself. So let me see if I can see names. My problem is my screen's not showing me any other names.
Hey, let me help Derek. Let's ask Dr. Keys, Dr. Phyllis Keys.
Oh, perfect.
Good morning. I'm Phyllis Keys. I'm the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs at Morgan State University. Yeah, I'm having some challenges with freezing on the computer from time to time, but I'm glad to be here this morning. And I'm representing Dr. David Wilson and Provost Hong Tao Yu at Morgan State.
Thank you. Dr. Keys, you will pass on.
Oh, what about, I'm sorry, I came on a little bit late. Has Martha Snyder been introduced? Yes?
Yes, yes.
Candace?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe John Tell.
John. Okay. I don't see that name.
John Tell, I was
John
thinking.
Tell. Oh, John Tell. Okay, John Tell.
Yes,
Good morning.
Matt.
John Green, Legislative Director with MAC. I'm going to see if I can pass it on. How about Sarah Baker?
Hi, I'm Sarah Baker. I'm with Department of Legislative Services. And I can't find any names.
How about Al Dorset?
Good morning,
Sarah.
everyone.
Yes.
Yep, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. Excuse me, I'm a little bit under the weather, but I'm Al Dorset, Director of the Office of Student Financial Assistance, and I'll pass it over to my Assistant Secretary, Jeff Newman.
Good morning, everyone. Jeff Newman, Assistant Secretary, Finance and Administration, Maryland Higher Education Commission, and I'll pass it off to Michelle Lambert. Thought I saw her on the list. Maybe she's not here. Then we'll go to, what's that? We'll go to Monica Randall.
Thanks. Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. I'm Monica Randall. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, and I will pass it on to Soma from MHEC.
Good morning, everyone. Soma Kadia, Assistant Attorney General, Legal Counsel to MHEC, and I'll pass it to Brad if he hasn't gone yet.
I kicked it off, Soma. Thank you, though. I think you've got Trish at MHEC that hasn't been introduced.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Trish Gordon-McCown. I'm the Director of Academic Affairs. I apologize. I had my lid on. Nice to see everyone.
Thank you. And Trish, you'll pass on to someone?
And, okay, so I have Everett Jackson.
Sorry, everyone. Good morning. I'm multitasking. I'm Everett Jackson, Associate Director of Veterans Affairs.
Okay, on behalf of Everett, I'm passing to Emily Dow.
Good morning, everyone. I am Emily Dow. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Academic Affairs here at the Maryland Higher Education Commission. I now see that Michelle Lambert joined, so I'm going to turn it over to Michelle for introduction.
Wow, I definitely did not thought I was participating this morning. My name is Michelle Lambert. I am a policy analyst at the Department of Legislative Services, so I'm just here to listen and learn. I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Sarah Baker, unless she's already spoken.
So Sarah has spoken. Are we still waiting on someone? Has everyone been introduced so far, or are we missing somebody?
Alex is on the line.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Alex Shalou. I'm the Associate Director for Institution Review at MHEC.
Wonderful, wonderful. So again, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. As I said, we have an excellent and ambitious agenda for today. We want to start with our first item, Maryland's 55% degree attainment goal. And we want to look at our progress, some discussions. Just to put some context, in 2013, Maryland Legislative Assembly, and in fact, one of the first state in the nation to set this goal for the entire state of Maryland. And this was goal set for 2025. Today, we want to take a little bit of your time and discuss the progress, where we are, where are the gaps, and what should be looking at going forward, what's happening around our state, what's happening in the nation, what are the present challenges and future opportunities for the state, and based on that, how should we go about revising these goals or setting new goals for the next 10 years. So Dr. Dow, I think you will lead the presentation on 55% goal first.
Yes, just sharing my screen real quick. Thank you, Secretary Rye, and again, good morning, everyone. These are slides prepared by our Director for Research and Policy Analysis, Dr. Barbara Schmertz. She would normally give this presentation, but unfortunately she's away for a family engagement unexpectedly. So here I am. I will do my best to answer some questions that you might have, but just wanted to provide an overview before we go into some discussion. So just as Secretary Rye noted, this was a goal set in 2013 that at least 55% of Maryland's adults ages 25 to 64 would hold at least an associate's degree by the year 2025. We were one of the original states, and Maryland is one of the 48 states that Lumina Foundation recognizes in its Stronger Nation report that meets the criteria for rigor and efficacy. The math calculation behind this is very simple. It's the number of Maryland residents with an associate degree or higher divided by the number of Maryland residents for that same age bracket. So fairly simple, basic math. The complication comes into play when we talk about how we get the information for residents with associate degrees. We know that our colleges and universities across the state, both public and private, are contributing to these to this degree production. But we also know that we are importing and exporting individuals with those degrees on a regular basis. So model by the numbers provides some basic calculations of how we are getting to our final denominator. So you can take a look at these. The factors at play is, again, not only the degree production by institutions, but in-migration, out-migration, employment opportunities, and other dynamics tied to educating, attracting, and maintaining a talented workforce. So it's not just about colleges producing students with degrees, but it is about how we keep those students here and how we attract students with degrees to be employed in the state of Maryland. You might have seen this chart in previous presentations. Our campuses are doing a really good job at meeting their goals and are in fact doing better than expected per the projections that we had set forth way back when in 2013. So our colleges are graduating students, completing students, either at the associate's degree or higher. However, because of that in-migration, out-migration dynamic, we are not necessarily on track to meet the 55% completion goal. If at our time of projection right now, we would be at about 52% by 2025. That 52% of Marylanders have an associate's degree or higher. You can see a little bit of a dip due to the pandemic there. So we're hopeful that that picks up, but only time will tell. Additionally, the state progress has been uneven, and this highlights some of our gaps, particularly racial gaps, in terms of the percentage of students obtaining credentials, and particularly either an associate's degree or bachelor's degree. A bit of federal context, as many of you are aware, the Obama administration in 2009 set a federal standard that 60% of students 25 to 34, so a much smaller range than what Maryland has, completes at least an associate's degree by 2020, which was not met. The Obama administration set aside federal dollars for grants to increase the investment in federal aid, but this is not a federal law. This was an administrative priority. And similarly, Lumina has, of course, played a huge role in this initiative, setting that another standard 60% Americans aged 25 to 64, much broader age range, will have at least a high-quality credential by 2025. And so they define high-quality credential as additional credentials beyond an associate's degree that lead to a meaningful workforce outcome. A number of states have these completion goals, and the years vary, as well as age ranges, whether or not they include non-credit credential or workforce credentials. And so this just gives you a brief summary of the states that are involved. Some comparisons, particularly between Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Texas. Massachusetts has been noted regularly as a high achieving state with a meeting their goal of 60% of residents 25 to 64 holding an associate's degree. They do note, Massachusetts, that they did not meet those equity goals and that there were quite a bit of significant gaps when they broke that population completion out. Pennsylvania, very similar, and we'll dive into Texas a little bit more. What's of note is these states did receive support, particularly from Lumina, to do this work with efficacy. So let me dive a little bit deeper into Texas. Texas had continues to have three particular goals. One is building a talent-strong Texas, expands attainment to include all working age Texans. So very similar to what we have here in Maryland, a age bracket of 25 to 64. Texas also highlights that they will receive a degree, certificate, or other post-secondary credential of value by 2023. So Texas is a bit more expansive than what we are in terms of just saying an associate's degree. They include certificate or other post-secondary credential. Their second goal is credential of value. They must propel graduates into lasting successful careers, and the careers must equip them for continued learning and greater earning potential. So they've set specific targets around this, not just a percentage, where they say 550,000 students will complete post-secondary credentials of value each year, so that there is an annual production. And a second element is that 95% of students will graduate with no undergraduate student debt or manageable levels of debt in relation to their potential earnings. So Texas has, again, stepped beyond what Maryland currently has, and has not only a percentage, but an annual expectation, and then incorporates a earnings value add. The third goal centers around research, development, and innovation. That Texas must be a leading state in generating knowledge through basic and applied research, and translating that research to innovations, discoveries, and economic development. So they have additionally created 2 more targets: increase of $1 billion in annual private and federal research and development expenditures by 2030. And that there would be 7,500 research doctorates awarded annually by Texas institutions of higher education. So this is just to highlight how Texas has not just set one goal, but has set additional supplementary goals that are intertwined in terms of completion, and students benefiting the state economy and keeping Texas at the forefront of these initiatives. So this is just one example of how Texas has used very specific metrics, or has set very specific metrics to achieve. Across all these goals, Texas is committed to an equity issue, breaking down the information by race, ethnicity, gender, income, and geography to make sure Texans have all Texans have an opportunity to succeed. 95% of the state's population growth was in communities of color, so they recognize the importance of this. And they quote, "If we do not advance our higher education goals equitably, we can't achieve them." So with that, we end with 2 discussion questions, and I'll turn the time back over to Secretary Rye. What goals should we consider for the next decade, considering the challenges and opportunities ahead? And how do we expand Maryland's economy and job base by leveraging such things as research, innovation, patents, and startups emerging from our institutions of higher education? And I will stop there, and Secretary Rye, turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Dow. So I just wanted us to first go back a little bit to 2013, when we were leading the nation in setting up the goals, and then seeing, where we are with that goal. But in the last 10 years, our demography has changed, economy has changed. Lot of changes are there in our state, our nation, and also in our world. So, looking at today, what are our challenges and what are our opportunities as we move forward? What happened over the last 10 years is a different thing. What lessons should be learned from that? Certainly, very, very thankful to all segments of our higher educations, because they have outperformed in terms of producing post associate degree or higher credentials. But certainly, we are not reaching our goal. That's number one. Number two, the alarming differences that are there. If you look at our white and Asian populations and Hispanic population, 30%. If you look at our Black population compared to white and Asians, 20% gap, that is very, very significant. Then credentials of economic value. How do we create that? Today, our state is short of 100,000 skilled workers. Our unemployment rate is 1.8%. There's no way our economy can grow given those constraints. So we were leading the state 10 years ago. In the last, you see the example of Texas and others. They have done these new goals in the last 3-4 years or so. And again, Limina Foundation is very active and others as well. So today we are very fortunate to have folks from HCM Strategies, and I wanted to and they are supported by Limina Foundation in this work. So I wanted to ask Martha Snyder to kind of lead this conversation. How do we go about setting up our goals? What should be the process? How should we determine those goals? How do we get input from a broader community? We're not interested in a solution looking for a problem. What Texas is doing makes sense for Texas. What should we be doing for Maryland, and what makes sense for Maryland? Martha, can you lead that conversation for us?
Sure. I'm happy to just kind of give some reflections and then perhaps maybe circling back to the questions that were at the end of Emily's presentation, as well as I think adding to that some questions around process. But just quickly, and just to kind of tie back to what Emily noted, both in the context of Maryland as well as in other states and other statewide goals. Certainly, goals should be the things that are challenging, quantifiable. Certainly, addressing gaps, having some sort of endpoint, and then the other important aspect of that is, as you're developing goals, to make sure that they are actually bought into, is ensuring that throughout the process of developing the goal, as well as throughout the process of aligning policies, investments, and establishing priorities aligned to the goal, there is broad stakeholder support and input to that process. In terms of just referencing a little bit what we've seen in recently updated goals. So again, as Emily noted, the early phases of establishing goals were very much focused on attainment, particularly attainment of associate degrees are higher. And what we've seen recently as states have gone through processes of updating goals is expanding the lens to include non-degree credentials, leaning into not just attainment generally, but attainment focused on value, ensuring that the credentials that individuals are earning have some sort of value in the workforce and in the workplace, or lead to further educational opportunities. Certainly addressing gaps and being inclusive of all residents. And then as referenced in the Texas example, including elements and components of the broader higher education mission, such as research. Just leaning in a little bit into the process, and we supported Texas in their the development of their new goal and the development of their broader strategic plan that is reinforcing of the goal, that Talent Ready Texas strategic plan. But just generally in terms of process, there's a few things. One is there's the the kind of assessment of where we are now, and the looking at data, both quantitative and qualitative, understanding the disaggregated data. Where are we now in terms of gaps in students, gaps in regions, gaps in opportunity? What is the assessment of the workforce? What are the needs currently and the needs of the future? Again, both statewide as well as on a regional basis. And then those qualitative analysis components, understanding the specific challenges of different regions, populations, institutional sectors, et cetera. So that kind of more goal-based, looking at the data, both qualitative and quantitative, but very importantly is the stakeholder engagement process, and ensuring that you're engaging the full pipeline of the educational system, K-12, post-secondary employers, the agencies and entities that support each of those components, as well as obviously bringing in the institutional leaders, institutional stakeholders, other policymakers, and the business community as well. And then what Texas did and what others are doing increasingly is that kind of landscape analysis of best practices to understand, once we set these goals, how can we put things into motion to help advance towards them. So just a couple of things in terms of the multi-step process that we think is needed to really build intentional stakeholder engagement. One, and this is certainly from the lessons we've learned from Texas, but other states as well. And certainly Secretary Rye, you noted, right, you are not Texas, you are not Pennsylvania, but certainly some of these process pieces I think can be learned from other states and put into the Maryland context. So making sure that there is a broader committee or some sort of ownership body that can lead the strategic vision and data review that can include other agency stakeholders, institutional leaders, et cetera. That you're engaging leaders and stakeholders across all sectors of higher education, both public and private, and I know both are represented here today. You're fostering facilitated, obvious, and engaged facilitated discussions with business leaders, employers, and other critical stakeholders across the state. In the context of Texas, so they did all of those things intentionally. The way that they did that was they did have a steering committee. They did that kind of led the broader visioning process. They had multiple touch points with institutional stakeholders and policymakers throughout the establishment of the new goal and the new goals, excuse me, and their strategic plan. And then they held virtual forums. It was in the midst of the pandemic, so the virtual was the necessary approach for engaging regional perspectives to ensure that there was regional representation and understanding of regional context, as well as convened a virtual statewide summit. And then built in opportunity for leading experts in relevant areas to come in and inform the strategies and processes for Texas's, again, broader strategic plan grounded in those goals. So I think stakeholder engagement and process is kind of fundamental. Oftentimes, we will see states establish goals that might be established by one or two entities or individuals in the state. And without that intentional stakeholder engagement, they are just goals. They are not driving change. They are not driving decision-making at multiple levels that is necessary to ultimately achieve the goals that you're trying to drive toward. So with that, I'm happy to answer any specific questions either around Texas or other states that we've worked with. But certainly, I think having an intentional process for engaging stakeholders and a variety of stakeholders throughout that process is critical to that future buy-in and the alignment of policies, practices, and resources that comes after having a goal set. So we did also have some discussion questions, but I think they were mostly aligned with what Emily shared, as well as some, kind of how do we move forward with a new goal? What are some of the challenges and strengths of the current Maryland higher education system? Where do you want to be 10 years from now? But then also those kind of questions around the process piece. Who should be engaged in this? What should that engagement look like, et cetera? Secretary Ray, I think you're cued.
Yeah.
Muted.
Thank you. I was very eloquent for the last 30 seconds. So, I invite your suggestions and questions on our progress on 55%. You see the data in front of you and what has happened. And then, where should we go from here, or how should we go from here? How should we determine the next set of our vision and goals? What should be the process? This is the first group where we have brought this conversation. And I think whatever we do, this group will be probably one of the most important group, because every sector of higher education is represented here. Certainly, business, industries, the legislature, all will have to be involved in this. This is just our first attempt at seeking your guidance and thoughts. So the floor is open for all of you. Matt.
Yeah, so I don't think I'm saying anything too controversial here, but I think the state got a lot out of the goal in the very beginning. But over the last 5 years, all we get out of it is a bludgeoning for not meeting it because of the denominator problem. And, you know, whatever we do, my 2 cents would be that we do something that is broader than just higher education, that involves more workforce, that involves not just degree production, and that allows for modifications along the way. You know, 10 years is a long time. It's great to have stretch goals. And at the same time, you know, we set a goal for ourselves that was never going to be achieved because of a denominator problem, which is sort of a silly way to approach it. So I would just encourage the group that make sure we're engaging other folks outside of higher ed and including other kinds of workforce development, training, and job opportunities for career readiness that would be more useful and not sort of hinge all of it on solely the higher education community.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. That's a very, very important point. And you saw Texas is saying 550,000, not percent, number of credentials of economic value based on what is their business and industry needs and other things, making sure that if Tesla is trying to leave California, they're landing where? Texas, in Austin, right? So companies are looking at that. Brad?
No, I think what Matt said, I just want to echo. And, you know, I was part of this way back in 2013 when we set these goals, and they did only include degree and associates and bachelor's degree. Well, we're in a lot of a different spot now than we were 10 years ago when it comes to other credentials, when it comes to post-secondary credentials. I know earlier on in 2013, and this is a question perhaps for you, Martha, there was a little bit of a, well, how do we count these other certificates? How do we count that in this goal? I mean, if we did, we would have already had the 55%, I'm pretty certain, as far as meeting it now. Do they, at their state level, have some way in which they report all of the completers and have this information readily available? I know we're working on that in Maryland. And I think it's in the right step to actually count this as a part of as we expand looking forward. But how does Texas actually do that?
Yeah, so Texas, I mean, the data are always the limiting factor. Texas does have a pretty robust data system. So they are able to capture a wide variety of completions, right, and different types of credentials where they're working right now. So they have access to a host of where students are completing and what students are completing. But where they're trying to focus in now is on that identification of the kind of credentials of value and really trying to get refined on that. And that is again, also a multi-stakeholder engagement, cross-sector engagement to really define that. But yeah, the data are fundamental to being able to capture those other credentials. Again, if they were just to capture everything that a student completes, that would be something that was achievable and they would probably meet their attainment goal. But as was referenced earlier, one of the refinements that they put in this latest revision was not just attainment generally, but attainment towards value. And that's where they are still working to refine the data.
Thank you. And I think this is an area where Maryland is unique and probably ahead because we are one of the few states that support non-credit instruction. We have a CC10 process that is certainly worth looking at. So we have some idea, and within the core classes or courses that qualify for state funding, the non-credit side, a subset of that could be the credentials of value. Brad, you have a follow-up question, I think, right?
Well, I was just going to say that's interesting to know. And as we move and think about ways in which we can reach new attainment goals, did any of the states, such as Texas or even Pennsylvania, if anybody knows, really align policy as well, like financial aid opportunities to help students, especially adult learners that are returning back? Was that a part of this? And it really does dovetail nicely with what we're doing in Maryland, where we have now, thanks to the blueprint, I believe there's a 45% goal for students graduating from high school to have some type of credential. I'm not sure if that's a credential of value. I think it is, but how that could be determined and put into the calculus in our number as well. And I'll stop there. It's a lot.
Yeah, I'll respond really quickly in the context of Texas in particular. Absolutely. So they just passed a strategic plan just over a year ago, probably maybe bordering on just about 2 years ago. And they have made significant, strategic alignments, both in terms of investments and policies to achieve all of the goals that are kind of within their strategic plan, both attainment, credentials of value, broadening to focus on adults, as well as the research piece. So yes, they have made, and one of the ones that has most recently received attention is their significant reforms to community college finance in the state. But absolutely, this has been kind of a stimulus or a catalyst for aligning strategy, policy, and resources in Texas. Pennsylvania is in the process of doing that. I'd say they're kind of similar to where Maryland is right now, recognizing they've had a goal. The goal probably needs to be revisited, and then using that goal in a very intentional way to, again, catalyze change, align strategy, policy, and investments.
Thank you. Dr. Rin, then Dr. Keys, then Dr. Caraco. Allison,
Sorry,
did you do?
not used to this system, sorry. Thank you. I'm concerned about the equity piece here. We could be meeting our goals, and again, I'm not going to have an answer. I just came from a system who's been working on this for a long time and can't seem to figure it out. But if we would work towards our equity goals a little harder, and I'm not sure what that harder means, but we would start hitting some different numbers. So what are we doing with a growing Latinx population? And again, I agree with Matt. We need to be reaching into the schools to ensure that students have the most support as possible so that they're well prepared as possible. But then we have to be well prepared to meet the students where they are when they get to us. And that means thinking differently about the way we teach. And again, that's on us. In terms of the kind of support we provide, whether that's co-requisite support instead of developmental education. Again, I come from a state where we just did away with developmental education. And those are the kinds of things that initially make it a little bit harder to hit your numbers, but then can start to change the equity gaps. But the equity gaps are incredibly stubborn. And I think we need to continue to work really closely with our institutions and our faculty on supporting the kinds of students we have and ensuring that our faculty are ready to meet first generation students, students of color, and students, international students, all kinds of different students.
Thank you. Dr. Keys.
That's pretty much exactly where I was kind of going to go with that also. So thank you very much. And also Brad mentioned a little bit about the financial resources and everything. So what I was thinking about is, because looking at Texas and what you said about, Emily said about Texas was showing that they had such a growth in their population of color. And so I wondered whether Texas had done anything that related to closing the equity gap, as well as this, like if I think about what happened with our graph, like it looks like Maryland was pretty much on target till the pandemic. But one of the things that came through with the pandemic is the challenges that our students in certain areas had with regard to technology resources. So when I think about it as financial resources, technology resources, the difference between advising and tutoring needs for students in certain communities compared to students who are well prepared for college and things like that, that I think of those kind of resources for those kind of spaces being able to potentially help address some of the change in the pattern that we've seen, as well as the equity gaps. So I just wanted to put that out there.
One thing, Dr. Keys, I'll point out is this. Certainly during pandemic, we came down a little bit and we were on our way to get to 55%. But I think that the serious broad equity gaps that are there, I think we want to reach our 55% goal, but we also want to make sure that all residents are included in that 55%. So given how our demography is changing, if that gap is there, then arithmetically we will never reach 55%, right? And 55% is not enough, because there's a reason why other states are going for 60%, right? 60 by 30, right? That's there. And certainly, credentials of value or economic value, I think will be important to us. Candice?
Well, I was just thinking about how dual enrollment, the great expansion of it, may help us reach these attainment goals, but we also don't know some of the impacts of what that great expansion of dual enrollment will mean for higher ed and the state economy writ large. And we're such an export state. There's a little bit of evidence that so far people who do dual enrollment stay in Maryland, but we don't know if that's going to be true longer term. And so I like the idea of a strategic plan that looks at not just a variety of credentials in terms of the workforce, but looking at research opportunities and looking at the other things that higher ed does to make a state a leader economically and socially, and in terms of democratic stability, if you will. And so if we can, I think the way to get at that is to some extent, through the money. We have a finance model that helps all boats rise, that the segments are intertwined. And I think if we can continue to think along those lines, particularly in terms of looking for support for students, I agree that the pandemic has really changed like the emotional landscape of our students, and things that were there already I think are just in much broader view. And I know I'm very concerned about when HERF money goes away, how our institutions are going to support students in the way they need.
I think that those are very good observations, Candice. I will say one thing that I looked at the data this morning. We lead, I think, the nation in sending students outside the state, right? But we are also one of the leaders in importing talent. Look at the teachers that we import, right? Where we are with the nursing. But having said that, I will also say that our students are going to other states by all means. There is no reason for them to go, given what's available here. But we also have thousands and thousands of high school graduates every year who are not seeking any post-secondary education. They're not going out of state. They're right here. How do we become ready for those students, right? I mean, that is where that 30%, 20% gaps that you're seeing, they are contributing to that gap. So we have opportunity to think differently. We have been talking about college-ready students, developmental, this, that, but student-ready colleges, right? We have opportunity to think slightly differently there. Other questions, suggestions? It's been very helpful for me, this conversation. Thank you. So I think that, we are getting a little bit ahead. I think our first order of business, certainly we want to see how we can engage Lumina and others to get resources, because we need resources to do this work. And certainly we don't want to use the state resources. Other states found, other resources to do this work. So we'll continue to work in that direction. Martha and her team will see how we can go forward there, and then bringing a steering group, and then going through learning from other states, how they engaged all stakeholders. Buy-in is important. We don't want one group or one agency to come up with the state goals. The broader conversation. So this was just the start of this conversation. But let me assure you that we will have this conversation in every meeting that we will have for this group and other groups as well. I feel this is an important work that we have to do. This is a time, changes in economy, changes in demography. It's a state that doesn't pay attention to the data and what's happening around us at this time. This will put us, 5 years, 10 years from now in an untenable situation. And we don't want to leave our state in that situation. So this is the time to think about this and come up with our plan, and then see how we go about implementing our plan, whether there are financial resources and other things needed. One thing I will ask for your support right away. Moore Miller administration in their transition report has few goals for higher education. One of the goals is increasing STEM graduates by 150,000 or so. So in that area, I want every institution, every segment to think about what can they do to increase STEM graduates. Now that increase, depends on attracting more students in STEM, but more importantly, students who have already declared STEM as a major, how do we retain them? And how do we make sure that they succeed and complete their credentials? So National Science Foundation just announced their SSTEM scholarship for this round. I was looking for Maryland institutions, some have been awarded. I want to make sure these are scholarships for STEM students. A low income student can pretty much get a STEM degree for free, 100% scholarship and other support, tuition, books, and other support as well. So that's one thing. The other program that National Science Foundation has is I-Use program, improvement in undergraduate science education. What are the national best practices in attracting and keeping students in STEM programs, especially first generation students of color? So our state has some successful SSTEM programs. Morgan State has SSTEM program. One can look at that. I'm sure they'll be happy to share the data practices with you. UMBC has a very successful I-Use program, I believe SSTEM program as well. And Brad, Montgomery College is one of the institutions awarded $2.5 million, all pretty much a scholarship in the most current one. You may want to invite them and see how other institutions can learn from that. I want to make sure that every institution of higher education in Maryland this year, I think there are twice a year when you can submit SSTEM and I-Use proposal. I want every institution to submit those two proposals. First, these are not highly competitive, especially SSTEM. It depends on how many low-income students you have in your STEM program. But even if you don't get the grant, even if you don't win, going through this process, I think Dr. Allison Wren talked about faculty. When faculty go through writing these proposals, they start looking at their data, they start looking at their practices, they start looking at best practices in the country, especially the programs that are funded across the country. What are they doing with their students? How are they supporting first generation students? How are they supporting students of color? So faculty learn from that, even if the money doesn't come, right? So I think it's a federal money, National Science Foundation, available right next door. There's no reason for us not to put proposals for these programs. So if next 1 year, my strong encouragement is that every institution should submit proposals for those two programs. Any questions on this topic? If not, let me assure you, this conversation will continue for the next several years. We will move forward. We will try to come up with steering group and other things. And hopefully we will have one of the boldest goals. We talked about credentials, completion. We didn't talk as much about research, innovation, translation, and work. We have outstanding institutions of research. We have to look at translational side. We have to look at how many patents are coming, how many startups are coming. We need to grow our economy. We are in knowledge economy, innovation economy. We are in creative economy. So I think that conversation should also get a lot of play in our meetings. So we'll be continuing to talk about that as well. So Dr. Dow, the rest of the meeting is yours. Forthcoming surveys.
Sure, thank you. So just a few administrative items for the Segmental Advisory Council to just be aware of. We've been working on a survey to send out to the regional higher education centers to better understand how they're being used and how they are a force of not only educational development, but certainly economic development as we are bringing programs to students as opposed to students to programs. So I just wanted to put that on your radar as segmental because we'll be going directly to the regional higher ed centers to complete this survey. It is basic information about how the space is being used, the institutions that the RHECs are working with. And then I'm happy once we collect this information at our next Segmental Advisory Council, report back out to you so that you can see the breadth and depth that the RHECs are being used for and opportunities for growth, particularly as we talk about completion goals and spaces for research. Certainly I know that our campuses have satellite locations that are being used as collaborative spaces as well. So this is, I think, the first point to look at formal RHECs. And then I think we'll want to look at additional spaces, physical spaces in which the institution is opening that up to communities, to business partners, to other organizations. So for example, I know College of Southern Maryland, there is an outpost that has a maker space and is used for business entrepreneurial opportunities. And that is just one example of many that in many ways meets the definition of an RHEC, but it doesn't necessarily have that formal distinction. So speaking to the broader breadth of what our campuses are doing, not just at their home base, but in these additional physical locations. So we'll start with RHECs. We're going to survey them. They're going to go, this survey is going to go straight to the regional higher education center directors. And then we can report back and think through how we can demonstrate additional opportunities in which the campuses are providing educational services. Any question on that? That's just information for your situational awareness, because usually we go through segments for those kinds of surveys, but this time we will go directly to the RHECs. Okay, I see head nods. Let me just move on to upcoming reports. Usually at this September meeting, we have a number of JCRs or other, Secretary Wright, before I move into that.
I just wanted to remind you, during the budget presentation on RHEC, our commissioners asked for student success data. I think we want to share the data with them. I know for a fact, I'm aware of data at universities at Cherry Grove. Students are significantly successful there, and majority of those students are first generation students. So getting that information from the survey will be important, and we want to share that with our commissioners.
Absolutely. Thank you, Secretary Rai. On to reports. Usually we have a handful of JCR reports or one-off reports or information that we're collecting. At this point, everything is pretty much on schedule. Thanks to all of you for supporting the institutions and responding to the intrusive advising report. We are in the final stages of drafting that one. The only additional report that I want to put on your radar is a report from the Mental Health Advisory Council. We are working to convene that council as soon as possible. Thanks to all for your nominations. They will have a December 1 report. And so because we have segmental representation through the specified categories, you'll be engaged through those individuals for that December 1 report. Other than that, all the other reports are kind of pro forma on our normal schedule, and everyone's been doing great. I just wanted to open that up for discussion if there are any other reports that we need to collectively talk about as the Segmental Advisory Council convenes. Nope. Head shaking. I know that there's a report on cannabis that MHEC is not involved with, which is fine, but I know you're all gathering together to write that report. And I don't know of any others at this point. So.
And everybody already turned in the advising and wraparound services. And I think everybody's doing lots of that. Yeah.
In preparation for legislative session, trying to make sure. Okay. Those are all my updates. Thank you, everyone. I will turn it back over to Secretary Rai and/or Al for OSPA updates.
Good morning again, everyone. Just some OSPA updates. Let me first start with current year awards, specifically focusing on the Educational Excellence Awards. At this time, we've awarded for the EA grant. This is initial and renewal students, 30,560 students for a total of 67,200 or $67,241,604. We are this week opening up for institutions to request payments. At this time, 803 students have been requested or certified for payment for a total of $1,086,000. So we are pushing out communication to institutions to start doing those certifications so that they can do payment requests. For the Guaranteed Access Grant, a total of 5,201 students have been awarded for a total of $71,802,532. So far, 404 students have been certified for a total of $3,734,920. And then additional, we do have the Next Generation Scholarship, in which 197 students have been awarded for a total of $2,981,000 or $981,000 and $700. A total of 5 students have been certified for a total of 50,500 students. So in total, you have for the EA program, 35,958 students have been awarded, whether it be the Guaranteed Access Grant, the Next Gen, or the Educational Excellence Award, for a total of $142,025,836. Of course, that is over our allocated amount because we always over award on those students based off our 3-year history, looking at the percent of students who either cancel or decline the award. We over award to make sure we award as much as possible to students. The real push is the earlier we get the institutions to do the certification and request payment, especially with the certification, canceling any awards on students that are not attending or not eligible for the grant. Then we can see what remaining funds are out there so we can do another award if possible for the Educational Excellence Awards. Last year, we went out and awarded late awards kind of in April, which institutions found it a little bit, I guess, confusing or hard because at that point in time, the semester is almost over. Trying to work out and get students to accept those awards. So the earlier that we can kind of plan this, it is better for us and for the students, especially for paying these funds out. We want to pay these funds out as early and fast as possible. Matt, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Just 2 quick things. One is what the EA waitlist was, and then secondly, just if that split historically between GA and EA, was it on track? Was it more GAs than normal? I just don't have the historic context in my head.
So I don't have the actual wait list on me right now, but I can get that to you. So I will write that down and I'll provide that. In reviewing, it is looking at a larger scale of more GA awards this year. But again, when I look at previous years, it's going off of what's paid. So moving forward, as of this year, what we'll be doing is we're running our reports to look at the amount of students who have been awarded, how many have accepted, how many have not accepted on a bi-weekly basis. That way we can do a comparison as we move forward, looking at that history. Unfortunately, there's no history in the MDCAP system to look at past. You only look at now. So we'll have to make that history moving forward so we can compare the differences between prior years and the upcoming years or new year.
So thank you, Al. What I want to say, we are Brad before. Yeah, Brad.
No, I just wanted to say thanks, Al, for the email that you sent me on Friday about the awards that you've made in the Promise Scholarship. And I noticed in all these awards, whether it be the EAGA or Next Gen, you've made a lot of awards, but now you're waiting on the certification of those awards at the institution. If there's a way that you can share with me by college, specifically for the Promise, how many have been initially made, so that I can share that with my financial aid officers and get them busy certifying this so that we can move on to the next round of awards in the Promise. I really want to make certain we are able to spend all of that money down, and providing all the information I can to my colleges would be very helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Al. Generally, we are interested in making a lot of improvements in financial aid process. We want to make sure that students get this money easily, and while getting there, they should have better experience. So number one, Al is leading a group where they will be changing the MD cap system. An RFP will go out, and a more user-friendly application system or application platform will be developed. Al is also leading a work group. They are looking at different changes in GA programs and others, looking at what are the national best practices and what makes sense. All of you are represented in that work group. Make sure your good ideas are presented there. Promise Scholarship, again, from next year, that will be decentralized. That process will work much better. The students don't have to apply by March 1st to get that scholarship. And the worst thing is that we know we have so many students who can benefit from these resources. And if we leave those resources at the table and return the money, that doesn't make sense because of the process and all other things that are involved. So I expect improved process, better technology, but we also understand the constraints that our Office of Financial Aid has. Over the years, their staff has been reduced by 50%, but the number of programs they administer has doubled. So in MHEC's budget for FY25, we are strongly advocating for new resources for our financial aid office. Dr. Dow.
Sure, thank you. Sorry, Al, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I've gotten a couple of questions on the, and I'm going to not call it the right name, but essentially the teacher stipend initiative for, I don't know if you're able to provide the group an update on that. I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
No, all right, I was prepared for it. So I plan on talking about it a little bit later. Do you want those that update now, or do you want me to go through and hit that when I get there?
I leave it to you and Secretary Rye. Sorry, I didn't know that you were not done. Sorry.
I think what we can do is just alert everyone that teacher stipends, we are looking at pretty seriously the process and how the funds will be going to students. All that will be available soon. Just like Promise Scholarship, we also want to make sure that teacher stipends are also available to students in easily accessible manner. And we want to make sure that every single dollar is used. So Al will follow up and he will have more information. And I believe he'll be working with the deans of education at your colleges. So you want to make sure that deans are aware that something may be coming from our financial aid office about it. Dr. Rin.
I didn't have my hand up.
Okay, sorry. Brad.
You had mentioned that the RFP has gone out on a new financial aid system, and you may have even mentioned the timeline in which you're expecting to have this system up and going, but I don't remember what you said, Mr. Secretary or Al. Is there a scope or a timeline of which you're planning to sort of roll this out so that I'm sure we'll be engaged in the process, but I'm just curious to know if it's for next academic year or even longer term?
So let me take this one, Brad. Secretary's timeline is yesterday. So, so I think they're all working from that timeline, but we have to go through an RFP process that has to be evaluated from compliance point of view and IT point of view through Department of General Services and do it and other things. We expect RFP to be out late October or early November. Then you know how the process of building new stuff. I would say about 18 months. And input from everyone is welcomed at any time. If you are aware of a state that has a much better process, a much better tool, much better platform, please share that with Al. Al, anything else you want to add to that?
No, you're right on point, Dr. Raya. So the RFP has not been submitted yet. It is scheduled to go out late October, early November. Just the process of going through do it and getting it approved. So that is the big push with the RFP.
Thank you. Now we are at a point where we want to hear from you. Great things that are happening on your campuses. You are welcoming students and your fall semester has gone well. Member updates. Matt?
I'm sorry, can I ask one other financial aid question, which was just, I know there's been the big effort to staff up and to make sure that, reorganize the department is sort of focused on different areas. And I was just wondering if we could get a quick update on that piece and then move to the next piece. Sorry, I didn't know we were moving the agenda.
No problem. We've been pushing forward with the positions. We were given 3 new positions from the legislation this year. We have moved forward and actually reclassed those positions. The financial or OSFA has broken into more units now. So the units that we have a need-based unit, which will focus on the GA grant, 2+2, any other programs that fall under need-based. We have a decentralized unit that will focus on Promise moving into that, but before WDSS, all the programs in which institutions receive money or they kind of manage the money there. We have a career-based unit. We have a LARP unit, our loan assistant repayment unit. We have a compliance unit. We have our legislative and unique programs unit. And then we have our service obligation unit for our career-based programs that have a service obligation piece. We've broken that into units so people can more formalize on it. So with that, we have currently we have 3 program managers. Mr. Carl Brooks oversees the decentralized unit. Ms. Donna Curitin oversees the service obligation unit, and Ms. Glendetta Matthew oversees the career-based unit. We also have been fortunate to have a systems associate director now that we've also implemented, Ms. Caitlin Johnson. So the 2 leftover areas, we're actually posting those positions, or they are posted now. We've actually hired someone for the need-based unit, which will start this Wednesday. So as I indicated in our FAO manual, which broke the units or broke the different sections into units in the FA manual, that FAO manual will be a constant update as we implement the different programs, such as the teaching stipend, the Department of Human Services scholarship, as well as the different program managers for the unit. Once we have all the different programs, that will also be given out to individuals for them to know who is responsible for those different units. So the biggest piece is the more that we focus on managing those units and programs with under those units, the more we can streamline our processes. We will be looking at also doing a communication schedule within the office. So the different programs that need different communication will have a schedule of what communication goes out and when it goes out. We also have a calendar that we're doing within the office of what programs and what actions on different programs are coming up so that we can tie that in with the communication. The biggest push is to take everything that we're doing, put it in the FAO manual, whether it be how to return funds, how to request a new check because you didn't receive it, anything that's going on, to put it in the FAO manual so individuals have it there to see, as well as has communication of who to contact.
Super helpful. Many thanks, Al. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Allison?
Thank you, Sanjay. Just a couple quick updates from the University System of Maryland, and then I'll turn to Candace to give more details. Tentatively, our enrollments are looking better, not, obviously over the moon, but there is ongoing recovery, I guess we'll say, from the pandemic, despite the fact we're also hearing about COVID. So there still is a pandemic. And the other thing, Sanjay, your point about applying for these grants, as you may or may not know, the system hired last year a vice chancellor for research and economic development, Dr. Michelle Masucci. And Dr. Masucci comes from a very strong career in research at Temple University, where she was vice president of research for many years. And she's really pulling the system together, doing some system-wide grant potential work, as well as helping some of our smaller campuses who don't have the infrastructure. We're not, College Park can handle things, but a couple of our other campuses need some support. So she's doing quite a bit about that. I'll make sure I mention to her this NSF work to make sure that we're staying on top of that. And I'd have to check with my campuses. I'm not sure who's in on that. So Candace, you want to give a couple more detailed updates?
Sure. I'll just mention Provost Transfer Council. Last year, a group of provosts from community colleges and USM met to, look at alignment issues. Dr. Keys, I'm going to send an email to you today to invite Morgan and you or your provost to the Provost Transfer Council and your faculty to the affinity groups that will meet. I also talked to Katie Gantz, the provost at St. Mary's, the other day at MHEC. MICUA, in the past we've done some work with MICUA, but I think the public's felt kind of under pressure with the 70% rule, which you guys don't have to use. So we can talk offline how you want to deal with all that. And Emily, I sent you an email. We're working on a draft charge for the for the faculty affinity groups, which I'll send to you, and everybody can give feedback, and then we'll send it out. So that work is very substantial for faculty. Changing your SLOs is it's a shared governance process. So this will not turn on a dime. And so Clay Raley at PGCC and I have talked about the need for communication, patience, thinking the best of people, and we'll work through it. Arts implementation. So it turns out to be a challenge to do full integration with your catalog and your course equivalencies for about a dozen different student information system platforms. So we have an advisory council. Emily's on it. All of your segments are represented. So what we're going to do, because there's some correction process going on with integration, we're going to go to a plan B for spring, which is going to mean uploading what we call a flat file, like a CSV, of kind of more recent equivalencies, so that we hope to have this functional for students for spring. So your reps are all in on this. The co-chair of the Arts Advisory Council is from Morgan State. The other co-chair is from the College of Southern Maryland. I can give you more detail if you want it, but people are on it. We're doing the best we can on that. And they were I think the quotely purchase by Parchment probably impacted Parchment's ability to move as quickly as we might have wanted. Yes, Secretary Rye.
No, I think I did it by mistake.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to take any questions about that. And then the last thing I would just say, and this goes back to Al talking about staffing. One of the vice presidents for enrollment management sent me the other day a note from the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, and it said like a survey saying that half of the staff in that profession are thinking of leaving within a year. And we know that admissions, to a certain extent, advancement, financial aid, there's turnover with young people, but this is different. This is bigger, and FAFSA simplification is big. Like, I'm hearing financial aid directors saying they feel like they're starting a new career. So I don't know what we can do as a state to support our financial aid officers. I mean, some of it's pay, you know, and that's a tough thing on its own. Some of it's workload. You know, I often think it's maybe more workload even than pay. And so I don't have any answers. But I just see this as a strategic challenge. If half of them at this critical point, writ large and writ small, are thinking about leaving.
Thank you, Al. You made Al very happy, and we are very much aware of the work that financial aid folks do, and we are also concerned about the issues that you have just suggested. We hear about them regularly. Anything we can do at the state level, I think that's important. Al, you raise your hand.
No, thank you, Candace. And I just want to, even for the colleges, when you look at the turnover with the colleges and, you know, not only federal guidelines, but our state legislation and how to do our programs, we realize it within our office. It's a big push for more trainings, more resources to provide to the different institutions, because we all work together as a team. So it's an impact overall, and just a stronger strategy of how we come together to make it work, so it's not overwhelming to any side, but more so working efficiently as a team, knowing that we're interdependent on each other.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other update? Matt?
Sure. This is a little bit early for this one, but I know we're going to need the help of probably a lot of folks on this in the Segmental Advisory Committee. We've had some discussions with the Census Bureau. If any of you have seen their post-secondary employment outcomes work, it's pretty impressive. You can track students by major, to their industry, to their geographic location, as well as their earnings 10 years out anywhere in the country. The conversations were promising. We've reached out to MLDS and they're intrigued. We have the Census Bureau reporting to the Research and Policy Board of MLDS in October. And then my hope is that MLDS will be, and this group as well, will be supportive of working with the Census Bureau. We need a one-line change, one-line bill to allow MLDS to provide data to the Census Bureau on a student unit record level, which will be sort of the collective support. But it'd be valuable to every segment. It'd be valuable to the goals we're about to be setting together. It would be valuable to each institution to see where their students wind up by major, and which parts of the country, and which what their earnings look like. So we're very excited about it. It's a little bit early because then we need a bill before we can even get the real work done, and then the real work with the data goes on. So it'll probably be a 2-year effort, quite frankly, but well worth it in my mind. I look forward to working with all of you on it moving forward. That's an update. And then I apologize, but I have one other last question that Candace's comment reminded me of, which is, given that we do have EFC in our regs, is MHEC anticipating a change to the regs in order to meet the new FAFSA requirements?
Yes, we are. So one thing we're looking at is with the work group for the EEA work group, or mainly focused on GEA, we are looking at 2 pieces. One, how we update the regs to fit that legislation that is passed. Luckily, legislation doesn't use EFC, so it's really just the regs, which we have more control to update, and we'll be presenting that. But also, we're looking at a scaling model for eligibility and award that we're presenting as a proposal, which we'll look at right now. The award or eligibility is based off 130% of the poverty guideline for a student to have GA cover that student's bill. We are looking at a scaling model where we take that up to 150% for a student to have 75% of their bill covered. 175% of the poverty guideline, a student would have 50% of their bill covered, and 200% of the poverty guideline, a student would have 25% of their bill covered. And I can show that in our next segmental meeting, because it still shows out with the award that a student would still receive over or be eligible max amount for the lowest amount over what the EA program currently offers. I think it was about $5,000 for a student who meets the 200% of the poverty guideline income. Their award max could be $5,000. So that's another piece that we're looking at proposing there, but we will be including changing EFC to SAI in those regulations, and we are working on proposed regulations now that should be ready, I'd say, by the end of September, just because we're working on Promise, GA, teaching fellows, and the stipend. So, and if I may add, teaching fellows, we did implement some programs that we did implement. Teaching fellows, we did implement that non-residents are able to apply for that now. So we're actually going to be going out and opening up teaching fellows again to get more money spent and share that with the institutions, as well as we did increase we did change for Promise the amounts or credits from full-time to 6 credits half-time, as well as extend that deadline date for Promise back to April 15th, 2024. So we've seen a major growth in initial students eligible for Promise, which, I think even a lot of institutions are a little bit surprised of. Now it's really just kind of going through it and seeing, who's going to be really eligible for those individuals that we've awarded. But we've already pushed out as many changes that came through legislation that we could manage to actually push out and award as many students as possible.
Thank you. Brad.
Oh, thank you, Al, for that update. I know getting things changed in regs takes time, and getting it approved and all the way through the ALER process is always a kind of have to work backwards from when all of that actually goes on. But I'm glad it's on the radar because it does change a lot of the way our need-based programs are worked. And I guess as far as my updates, Candace, I'm sorry I missed some of yours, but I think there's a lot of similarities in what's going on with ARTSIS and Transfer with Success Act. My internet's a little unstable this morning. Other than that, I'll kind of echo what Dr. Wren was saying about enrollment. It looks very positive for us, at least at this point. I know there's a lot of third week census data collecting going on, but I do anticipate sort of a uptick in our enrollment, which is a tremendous news for my segment, which really has been suffering for the last few years. Other than that, we have a new president that has started as of August 14th, Dr. Deborah Casey. She's joining us from Washington State. She's the new president of Warwick Community College, and she's really, I think, going to be a dynamic new president from a college that's had a president for a long time. So we're glad to have a new president there. And other than that, I think we're just sort of working on our JCR reporting. We have one on FTEs and how CADE is operated within the state. We'll have that in by the deadline. I don't think MHEC was involved in that. I think it was solely MAC, and we're working on that as well. Other things that I just have a question I don't want to lose sight of is competency-based education regulations and updates on that. I know, Emily, you're working on it. I know it's something that has been in this sort of the cycle of issues. But I know that there's a lot of interested people looking at how that will play out as well. And that's about it from where I sit right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other update? If not, let me again thank you for your time today. Thank you for your guidance today. Thank you for some good conversations. I think this is a group going forward. We want to have some really meaningful dialogues here. How to advance our state? How do we support all our students? And, being a mathematician, I'm, data driven. I think, more conversations around that, I think is important. And I think, two requests. From our side, you on this 55% progress and next set of goals, we will work at our end with Martha at HCM Strategies and Lumina, and we'll come back and give you some update at the next meeting. My request from you is Dr. Dow will send her presentation to you. There are 2 questions in that presentation. Make sure that you share that with your colleagues. And when you come back here, come back with some thoughts. I think your expertise could be very helpful for the state in coming up with these goals for the next, 6 to 10 years or so. So we will work on that. The second one is National Science Foundation. Again, a STEM program and IUS program. Make sure that all your colleagues are aware. And in the next cycle, my strong encouragement is that everyone submits a proposal. And within that, for four-year universities, there are wonderful models where NSF likes participation in collaboration of four-year and community colleges. UMBC has a good model with IUs with several community colleges, and I believe their STEM also involves CCBC and Howard and other community colleges. Make sure that you are collaborating with community colleges and putting at least proposals on both programs in the coming year cycle. I'll really appreciate that. I have reached out to National Science Foundation and asked them to give me data on how many proposals are coming from Maryland institutions. So I think this will help us on more Miller administration's goal on 150,000 additional STEM graduates. It will happen through these kinds of collaboration and innovative thinking. Again, thank you very much and have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful semester. Thank you.